Hi, it's Melanie Benson here, America's leading small business optimizer, and we are all about turning adversaries into allies today. We're going to tap into what I find, one of the most powerful ways to optimize your results, and that is to learn how to influence from a really powerful but authentic, meaningful, and I think a heart-based way. And I brought on today one of my most favorite people on the planet to talk about it and to share his brand new book. So I'll share a little bit more about our guests in just a minute. But let's talk first. What does it mean to optimize? This weekly podcast is all about what I consider to be one of the most powerful things in small business, and that is finding the small things that make a huge impact on your bottom line, on your ability to impact and influence thousands of people all over the world, and to create a business and a life that just delivers extraordinary fulfillment. And optimizing is all about, learning what works and then learning the power of continuing to do it instead of chasing all the bright, shiny objects that ultimately get us overwhelmed. So wouldn't that be more fun, when we have a way to have more joy, more passion, and more power coming through our business? And today we're going to explore one of my most favorite books that's come out. This is called Adversaries into Allies. Win people over without manipulation or coercion. And the author is with us here today, Bob Burg. Now, Bob is best known for his international bestseller, which was the first book I read by Bob, The Go-Giver. And Bob has recently published this new book as a way of, I think, taking the go-giver concept to a whole nother level, and to get tools in our hands as business owners and entrepreneurs and people who we are very committed to the work we do. Let's get better tools in our hands so that we can have a greater impact, but do it in a way that's full of integrity and it has a lasting impact rather than doing more harm than good. So Bob, thank you so much for coming on and and talking today about the new book and why you wanted to write it and, what kind of impact it's having on your life and the lives of the people who are reading it.
Well, thank you. It's always great to be with you, Melanie Benson. You are one of my favorite people in the world.
Thank you. And I don't have my Starbucks cup, but I did bring my Starbucks to the game.
All right.
Did my Dunkin' Donuts guy, does he have Dunkin' Donuts? You're not cheating on Dunkin', are you? You didn't go to the dark side.
100% Dunkin' Donuts with its 1,000% milk fat.
Awesome. So Bob has been known to serenade the Melanie with the Dunkin' Donuts song and to find really clever ways to even tweet those serenades. Like, who knew you could tweet a serenade? It's awesome.
Who knew?
So then now they're gonna call you out and they're gonna ask you to share it, right?
Of course, of course. Okay. Will we? That's the question.
Yes, exactly. We'll hold them in suspense. So what was the inspiration for you for writing the new book, Adversaries into Allies?
Melanie, it really comes down to that this is carrying on my dad's legacy, is really what it is. I've been very lucky to be raised by great parents. That I still have them, and I'm very, very fortunate. And what's interesting is when my dad had his business, he was sort of out in the spotlight a little bit, as I tend to be, just by the nature of obviously what I do. So I take a lot after a lot like him in how I communicate. Only in my case, it's not really as natural as it was for my dad. He just had that what I call people skills, right? He had that knack for being able to bring out the best in people, and a lot of it was just his genuine interest in them, his genuine interest in making them feel authentically good about themselves, and he just had a way about that. And I grew up watching that, learned a lot from it. I wouldn't say that it was my natural inclination, though. So I had to go through a long time of not being like that, plus, dealing with some of my own issues. We all have issues, but some of mine made it so that it wasn't likely that I could naturally fall into that way of being. And it was a decision I eventually ended up making, which made a big difference in my life. Now, obviously, aside from just getting to watch my dad in action, which was the best thing, I studied the masters as well. You know, the books like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is the book, of the genre, and so many others that have been out there. And so many people teach this well. So I think I've been able to take that and utilize it in my own life and teach it to others. This is the book in which I've really taken that methodology and I think put it into a format that anyone can relate to it and be able to actually apply it. You don't have to learn 7 ways that this could happen or 3 ways that this could. I mean, all those are great. Those are all wonderful. But this is just for the person like me who doesn't catch on to things really quickly. That's who's going to like it.
I so don't get that about you, Bob. You're like one of the sharpest guys I know. And by the way, to say that you don't you don't have the same level of way of being that your dad did with people, where you're just so naturally able to engage with them. Gosh, I watched you in a room. I've seen you in stages. Like, you really do touch people, and you have such an impact. You could just read your Facebook threads and know that you have that way with people. Maybe it came through osmosis.
Well, here's the thing, and I appreciate you saying that, and it means a lot to me that you do say that. I think maybe it was that there was a natural part of me that should have been like that, but some of my experiences and especially, and not everybody knows, but I've written articles about this before, that I had and still have obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, kind of the bad kind, and that really kind of did a number on me in my life, and it made me I lived my life for a long time very angry and very unappreciative, and while I was always, I think, a nice person and a respectful person, it didn't take much to get me off that track. So I think maybe what I've done is I've stepped into what is natural and authentic, but I had to go the long way around. So I probably said that I probably said that incorrectly.
That's a great way to look at it, because I think some people can relate to that transformation where we have a way that we are that isn't really working for us, and we have personality traits or behaviors that are kind of shutting us off, and then we find our way back to a more authentic way. So, I think this is an interesting way to kind of move into one of the things I like to talk about on the series, and that is, what was the problem that you saw out there that you think this book could help people solve for themselves?
That's a great question. I think most people just aren't equipped with the people skills to be able to help themselves and help others, help the marketplace, what have you. Melanie, I believe that you can have practically all the important success traits or characteristics. You can be very talented, you can be a very high character, you can be ambitious, kind, charitable, hardworking, thrifty, energetic, have a knack for numbers and a head for business, you can be even-tempered, you can be very creative, and all that's great. It's wonderful, it's terrific. However, unless you can influence others, move people to the desired and appropriate action, it's very, very difficult to achieve or really attain huge success. On the other hand, when combining benevolent intent with a learned skill set, a system such as you teach to the people you coach, you can find yourself really attaining satisfaction both business-wise and personally in a way that's constant, consistent, and really predictable, and really touch people's lives in a very value-based way. And again, I call that ultimate influence, which in my definition simply means the ability to get the results you want from others while helping them feel genuinely good about themselves. It's really nothing more than mastering people skills. And I think in many ways, we could say that technical skills, the business skills, all those great talents and so forth, probably accounts for about 10 to 15% of someone's success. And people skills probably counts for 85 to 90%, which doesn't mean the technical skills aren't important. Of course they are. We've got to have competence in what we do. But how many people do we know that have great potential, great talents, great skills, but they just don't have that knack, those people skills, that way of dealing with others in a way that they can bring out their own best and the best in others and create alliances that help everyone move forward.
So true, and I love that you're bringing that out this way because I would agree with you, and especially there are four personality styles, and two of those personality styles are more introverted. They are less comfortable in those engagement and connections than the people who are more extroverted. And then there are people who are so results oriented that they don't really think about how they're making anyone feel in that approach. And they're all about like, how do I get the result I want? How do I get the results I want? And they don't really think about how they're going about affecting other people in their mad dash to get to their destiny. And so what I'm hearing you say is that, the idea of what we might say turning adversaries into allies is that you learn how to really connect with people. You learn how to have influence in a way that makes them feel good and ultimately moves everybody closer to the goals that they have.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to do that, you've got to really focus on them.
Yes. It's not about you.
Right. It isn't about us. It's about, it's funny because you can influence, which is, again, is moving people to a certain action, usually within the context of a specific goal. That's what influence really is. Literally, we could say it's an unseen flow of power, and that would be accurate, but I don't think it captures the essence of influence. I think it's really all about pull. You very rarely hear people say, "Oh, that Melanie, she is just so influential. She has a lot of push with people."
Right.
No, she has a lot of pull with people because that's what influence is. It's an attraction. Great influencers attract people to themselves and to their ideas, and they do this again not through push, but through its opposite, pull. And this pull is a very legitimate form of power. Power being the opposite of force, because force is what? It's manipulation, it's intimidation, it's compliance. And we know that you can have positional authority and make people do things, but is that going to bring out their best and have them do the best job? Typically, you can be leading a team of 1,000 people, a committee of 3, or a family member, and if you use compliance to move them, at best, they're going to do exactly what they're told. At worst, they're going to find a way to sabotage the process completely. But when you have commitment, and that's the opposite of compliance, when you have commitment, that's a whole different story. And I think this commitment is practically always the result of the influencer not just understanding, but embracing Dale Carnegie's famous admonition in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he said, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. And so the great influencer, and this goes back to what we're saying, is that Dante back there?
Can you hear him? Yeah. Dante's saying hi in the other room.
and so when we ask these questions, how does, like we were saying, it's about the other person. So the influencers ask themselves, well, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does that align with their goals, their wants, their needs, their desires? How does what I'm asking this other person to do align with their values? And when we ask ourselves these questions intelligently, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another human being to do our will, but as a way to build them as we're getting what we want, well, what happens is we've gone a long way toward earning that commitment. And a great friend of mine, I don't know if you know her or not, if you connect with her on Facebook or Twitter, she's a great friend and really a mentor of mine, a wonderful leader. Her name is Dondi Scumaci.
Oh, yeah, I know Dondi. Yeah,
she's great. And I love what Dondi says about this. She says, compliance will never take you where commitment can go. Okay? Compliance will never take you where commitment can go. And so the great influencer understands, again, that they're going to accomplish great things only through others, only with others, but they know it's not about them. It's about the other person. It's about everyone whose lives they choose to touch. And this could be anyone from family member to the person you're coaching, to the bureaucrat who wants you to sign 5 different forms before letting you do something that you want to do, or whatever it is. We need to be able to respectfully and authentically work with other people to bring out their best.
I love this. So, what would you say are some of the maybe some of the roles or some of the situations where this kind of influence could be really valuable for you? You know, you just brought up whether you have a team member or maybe even like a child, but you know, let's talk about some of the ways that this kind of learning to connect with people could have impact.
Well, there's so many different situations. It could be anything from that you need to bring an item back.
Right. So customer service.
Right. And
Or,
you don't
or oh, what you're saying is you want to get an item returned.
right, and
Okay.
you didn't bring the receipt with you.
Okay.
And their policy is that, there's no returns without receipt, no refunds without receipts. So this person who's at the customer service, they're not really trained to know how to deal with someone and maybe live in the solution. So as an influencer, you need to be able to help work them through that. On the other side, if you are that person who is the customer service person, you need to know how to handle that situation in a way that if you can't do what that other person really wants you to do, you've still got to do it in a way that they feel valued and they feel honored and they feel as though and they know that you appreciate them. I'll give you just an example, and the ultimate influence principle number 5 is to communicate with tact and empathy. And when you look at empathy, empathy is really being able, it's the identification with or vicarious experiencing of the feelings of another person. We could say, well, is that just putting yourself in the other person's shoes? Well, yeah, except for most people have different sized feet, which means we don't necessarily know what it feels like to be in their shoes. So we don't necessarily understand how they're feeling, but we can certainly understand and communicate that we know they're feeling something that is distressing. So I was at one of those, trying to think what it's called, but they do blood work, when you go and you take the tests in and so forth. And I was in the waiting room, and there was an elderly woman who approached the nurse receptionist desk. Elderly woman, very, very sweet looking, but she was very upset. And she said, "I can't believe you all lost my the test results, and I had to come all the way in again. And I don't believe it." She was very upset. And the nurse receptionist simply said, "Please have a seat. We'll be with you in a moment." Now, she wasn't rude, but she had no humanity, no feeling in her response. So the elderly woman tried again. And she sort of laughed defensively and said, "I'll tell you, if you all do this again, I'm through with you, and I'll tell everybody about this." And the nurse receptionist simply said, "Please have a seat. We'll be with you in a moment." Wasn't rude, but no humanity. Now, no empathy. All this woman, this sweet elderly woman wanted was for this person, this nurse practitioner, to just say something like, "I am so sorry. That should never have happened. I don't know how it did happen, but I'll check into it. We'll make sure this never happens again to you. Have a seat, and we'll be with you soon. Can I get you a cup of coffee or tea?" That's all she needed to do. She needed to be able to actually feel that another person was feeling something uncomfortable, and then she would have been able to do that effectively.
Right.
But she didn't. So rather than turning this adversary into an ally who could be a personal walking ambassador for this lab, she's probably got someone who told that story to 20 different people during the day.
That's a great example. I mean, we can think of some of the obvious ones where if you're in sales, obviously sometimes there's that tension and that disconnect you have with someone. And, when you're wanting to move someone into a decision, whatever decision that is, this could be really helpful. But, as a coach, one of the things that I'm loving about these principles because I'm reading the book right now, is that I oftentimes, it's not necessarily someone being an adversary, but there is resistance.
Right.
And there's disconnects that people get into when you're trying to move them into their more fulfilling and more powerful way of operating as a business owner. and being able to influence them to say yes to what they really want when they're in resistance. This is a powerful way to apply these principles. And
Well,
oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say thank you. I appreciate you saying that because you brought up a great point. Adversary doesn't mean enemy
Right.
in this case. It means someone who is in some way standing in the way of your accomplishing that goal you want to accomplish. And that goal might be to help that person, your client.
Yeah, and sometimes it's our self-sabotaging part, right? Like how can we influence that part of us is like really being a renegade. But it was even thinking, one of my clients is she's working with parents and teachers around teaching better strategies for learning, and one of the things I see through her is that oftentimes parents are getting into this adversarial, energetic dance with their kids when they're trying to help them accomplish their goals, but they're at war. So I could see this being really valuable for parents. Have you heard anybody saying how they're using it in their parenting skills yet?
I haven't heard that so much. I've had a lot of teachers already
Okay,
talk
good.
about how they're utilizing that both with their students and with the parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't heard the stories yet, about with parents and children, but I'm looking forward to that. And that'll be a neat thing to hear.
Well, and I know you shared earlier that there's been so much of your own journey that's been the catalyst for writing the book and sharing this information. And I know you come from the space of like, how do I help people have tools? But I'm kind of curious, what would you say was one of your biggest challenges that got you to the point where you wanted to get this book out there?
One of my personal challenges that I felt I had to overcome, as far as that helped me kind of
Create
learn
the book, yeah.
use it, or well, I for a long time just was very angry at the world.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back a lot to the OCD, the obsessive compulsive disorder, and so I'd say up till the time I was probably 35, I was fighting myself and fighting the world, and it really wasn't working for me. I could accomplish things and I could produce. I wasn't a particularly good leader, but I could produce. But I knew I wasn't coming anywhere near my potential. So it was really when I kind of understood I needed to embrace this. This is a way that I can fulfill a lot more of my potential. And I think that's what happened. And so this book's always been something that was eventually, sorry. This book is something that, was eventually going to be written. And I wrote a book years ago called Winning Without Intimidation, How to Master the Art of Positive Persuasion, which is a whole group of vignettes that, that I hope were helpful. But this took it to a whole nother level. This is, I guess, about 18 years after that one. So there's a whole lot more growth and a whole lot more experience than before. So, yeah, this is the book that I've been sort of waiting to come out with.
Right. It's almost like the book that's like the culmination of so much of our own work. And then when you get it out, it's like, okay, I feel fulfilled.
Yeah, I think so.
So you mentioned there's several pillars. How many total pillars are there in the Adversaries to Allies work?
Yeah, there are 5 principles,
Okay.
and those are, first, control your own emotions. Second is understand the clash of belief systems. 3 is acknowledge their ego. Number 4 is set the proper frame. And number 5 is communicate with tact and empathy. And at least one, usually more, sometimes all 5 of them will occur in any interpersonal transaction or any potentially negative interpersonal transaction.
Yeah, I think, and I was actually just on with a client. We were talking about one of the challenges he was having in taking his business to the next level is he wasn't controlling his frame. And that's what you're saying is that if you learn these different pieces, and then you can also start to see where things are breaking down in terms of getting to your ultimate outcome or helping a client or someone else get to their outcome.
Oh, absolutely. And it all starts with number 1. It all starts with controlling your emotions, because as human beings, we are emotional creatures. I mean, we're logical to a certain point, but we make a lot of decisions based on emotion. We back up that emotional decision with logic. We rationalize, and if you take the word rationalize, we tell ourselves rational lies, and we do that to justify our emotional decisions. Well, this isn't just in sales. This is life. And we've heard, we've heard the saying that, well, nobody can make you mad or angry or sad or what have you. But you know what they can do? They can purposely or even inadvertently push our buttons that cause us to make ourselves angry or sad or depressed or whatever. We look in the mirror and we see that 16-year-old, that reflection of the 16-year-old who we didn't like. And somebody says something that makes us remember ourselves. Is that right? And we feel terrible. Well, they didn't really make us feel that way. We did it ourselves, but they pushed the button to do that. Well, that's emotion.
Right,
And
right.
when we allow that to happen, so someone says something to us, it's insulting, it might hurt our ego, those feelings. When we're not in control of our emotions, obviously we're not in a position where we can take that potentially negative situation and turn it into something positive. When we are in control of our emotions, what my dad has always called being the boss of yourself, now we're in that position to be solution oriented. We can think. The great Zig Ziglar used to call it the difference between reacting and responding. And as he explained, responding's negative, or reacting's negative, responding's positive. When we react, we're letting outside circumstances or people control our emotions. When we respond, we're in control of our emotions. I love what he used to say. Did you respond well to the medication, or did you have a bad reaction? And that's really what it was. So we need to put ourselves in response mode so that we are in control of our emotions. They're not in control of us. Again, Dondi Scumaci, my great friend, I love what she says. Hey, you take your emotions along for emotions are a great part of life. They make life meaningful, right? So she says, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you're driving the car.
Great distinction. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit more about principle number 2. Like once you've learned how to control those emotions, what next?
Well, understand the clash of belief systems.
Okay, I like this one.
What is a belief? Well, a belief is a subjective truth. It's the truth as we see the truth as being, which isn't necessarily the truth. We've all heard about the car accident where there were 10 witnesses witnessing the same accident from just about the same view, and they all have 10 different stories about what happened. We operate out of subjective truths. Now, here's the thing: our belief system it's the lens through which we see the world. We could say it's our operating system, if you will. Mm-hmm. We have no control over the original belief system that we're given. It starts from when we're born. It's a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture and entertainment, the world's mores or the community's mores, everything we touch, taste, smell, hear, see, what have you. We don't even know, and by about 4, 5, 6 years old, it's pretty much formed, our belief system, the way we see the world. Well, here's the thing, Melanie, we don't even know this. We don't even know. We're not aware, we're not consciously aware that we are run by an operating system that we had nothing to do with creating. We are virtually servants of a belief system that we did not create. Well, so is the other person with whom you're about to have that difficult interpersonal transaction. They also are run by an operating system they didn't create. They don't even know they have. As human beings, we tend to also believe that everybody else sees the world basically as we see it, which is why you hear people say, oh, everybody thinks that way. Everyone loves that. Nobody likes that. I would never say that or do that to anyone, right? Well, it's because we're operating out of our own belief system. It's also why, as human beings, we make decisions based on very limited information. We fill in the blanks, the missing pieces, based on our own beliefs. So you can see how you've got two people, both unaware that the other person comes from a totally different operating system, each believing the other person sees the world the same way. So what we need to do is not necessarily understand their belief system. We probably don't even fully understand our belief system. What we need to do is understand that their belief system is probably a lot different than our belief system. And once we're conscious of that, now we've created an environment where we can work within that for everyone's benefit.
Great, well said. I love this whole conversation about beliefs and being in conflict because, I've seen so much of our own frustrations with anyone trying to make a bigger impact or get their business out or be able to create more wealth. It always boils down to our core beliefs. So now seeing how we're creating conflict with other people through those beliefs conflicts is really powerful. So I know you told us a little bit about principle number 5 before. But let's scoot through. I want to hear just a little bit more about principle number 3 and number 4.
Okay. Well, principle number 3 is to acknowledge their ego, not our ego. We don't have one. Everybody else has one, not us.
Not me. I don't have one.
Of course, we know we all have one. Now, the ego, by the way, itself is not necessarily good or bad. It just is. The ego is the I. It's that part of ourself that understands that we are a unique human being separate from everyone else. Now, this is a little bit politically incorrect to say that we're separate from everyone else because we hear that we're all part of one, and you know what? I'm not saying that's not true in terms of, Napoleon Hill talked about universal consciousness, being able to, the universal mind, and certainly quantum physics has shown that there's this, all of that's fine. In fact, I tend to believe that's probably true. But in our earthly existence, we live as individuals, as unique individuals. We can choose to be parts of, communities, families, teams, companies, what have you, but we are unique individuals, all acting out of our own sense of purpose, our own sense of what will bring us happiness, our own, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so that ego's fine. When we're in control of the ego, it can help us accomplish great things. Inventions are invented because of ego. We can do things that help ourselves and help other people, and it's terrific. It's when the ego controls us that we do things that are not productive. So again, just like emotions, when we're in control of our ego, fine. We can generate it to create great things. It's when the ego controls us that we're in a position that's not as productive and very counterproductive. Now, what we need to do is, of course, acknowledge that and understand that. But just as importantly, in this case, it's acknowledge the other person's ego. Now, when I say acknowledge their ego, I don't mean you say to the person, hey, buddy, your ego is out of control. No, that's going to have the opposite effect. What I mean is we acknowledge the fact that if this person's acting in a way that's whether it's nasty or unhelpful or doing things that seem counterproductive, the chances are good that it's his or her ego that's really calling the shots. And if we don't acknowledge that and honor that that just is how it is, we're not going to be able to help the situation. So we do need to acknowledge it. In any potentially difficult interpersonal situation, Melanie, that other person's ego probably will come into play.
And I think you're right. And it's kind of going back to what Don Miguel Ruiz always said in his 4 agreements. It's not about you.
Right.
So if you get that it's not about you, then guess what? It doesn't have to trigger you, and you don't have to have that reaction of it pushing those buttons that feels so out of so many people's control. It's like you can stop the cycle. Okay, good. So that's 3.
Hey, there's times if I feel I'm beginning to take something personally, I'll pick up his book and I'll go right to that chapter.
Yeah, it's a really great chapter. Okay, let's talk quickly about 4.
4 is set the proper frame. What is a frame? A frame is basically it's the foundation from which everything else takes place. Quick example. I was in and I talked about this in the book in one of the chapters. I was in a Dunkin' Donuts, and there was a little boy, probably 2 years old, 2.5 years old, who was walking around the restaurant. He was walking toward his parents when all of a sudden he took a spill on the floor. He fell. Now, I don't think he really hurt himself, but you could tell that he intuitively knew that wasn't supposed to happen. So immediately he looked at his mom and dad for an interpretation of the event. Now, what happened. He was looking at them to see how how he should be feeling about it.
Right.
Now, I really believe that had the parents gone, oh no, my poor baby, oh, he must be so hurt, he probably would have gotten upset and started crying. But they handled it so beautifully. They started to clap and they laughed and, oh, that was so good, oh, what a good trick. And he started giggling and laughing, and it was fun. What mom and dad did was they set a productive frame for their son. Now, it's easy enough to set the frame with a smile, with a good morning, or to show someone that you're happy to see them. And that's the trick, is resetting another person's frame who comes into this not in a win-win kind of context, or is in a bad mood, or what have you. And so very, very quickly, just an example of something that happened that, again, I also talk about this early in the book. I was pulling into the a parking space, and I really wasn't paying attention as I should have been, and I nearly clipped the guy who was getting out of the driver's side of his car. Nearly hit him. And I put on the brakes in plenty of time, but it really startled him, and he was angry and upset, and he just looked at me, if looks could kill, he just gave me a nasty look. Now, he reacted, who could blame him, but had I reacted and bought into his frame, well, I might have said, what are you looking at? And he just said, watch where you're going, and it goes,
Right.
And at best, it would have been uncomfortable. At worst, who knows what happens. But what I did in order to reset his frame after responding, I simply, I put an apologetic smile on my face. I raised my, and I went, sorry. And he immediately went, no problem. It's that simple, and it's that easy. Once we can control ourselves, we have the opportunity to either set the frame or reset the other person's frame.
Great. Okay, remind us what principle number 5 was again?
Yeah, that's communicate with tact and empathy. My dad has always defined tact as the language of strength. And I so totally believe that. I believe that tact is being able to teach. It's being able to correct someone, to critique someone, to, dare I be a bit politically incorrect and say, constructively criticize someone. And no, we never want to do that, but we're talking about the real world. And sometimes we have to be able to teach, the person overpaid on a negotiable item, or they gave some wrong information to the customer, or someone's disrespectful to whatever. But we have to be able to do it in a way that person, rather than being resistant and feeling offended and putting up a wall, is going to be very open, both to us and to the idea. And when we can do that, there's such power in that, Melanie. And it really is a matter of just thinking about what you're going to say before you say it. It's being equipped to know kind of the right things to say and the right way to say them. And, so really when you can do that, you're really in a position of creating a win for everybody involved.
Would you say that this is a concept that if you want to be a leader and you want to be able to have influence in this world, that it's basically making a decision that you are willing to go about this in a more, I like this as calling it almost like a peaceful way of influencing, versus being that destructive or demanding and overbearing person. Like, it's literally a decision. Who do you want to be, and how do you want to get there?
I think that's such a great way to see it. Do you want to be the manipulator, or do you want to be the persuader? Do you want compliance from people, or do you want commitment from people?
That's a great distinction.
And I agree with what you say. It is a decision. And in order for someone to go from one way of doing something to the more positive way, they first have to understand why they would even want to.
Yeah.
Because if they either don't know there's another way, or they're happy with the way they are, or they're miserable with the way they are, but they don't realize that they're miserable the way they are, they're not going to make the change. So it's really that person who either realizes there might be a better way to do something and they're open to the idea, or that person who intuitively knows they would rather get what they want in a way that's kind, in a way that's respectful, in a way that honors the other person. And I think most people are like that.
I think most people in the work that we are doing would probably respond well to that. So, Bob, I always ask my guests, what's a favorite mantra or quote that helps you do the work that you do, to stay inspired on the bad days, to pick you up if you're feeling low, or just kind of like that thing that helps you consistently be who you need to be to do the work you do in the world?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure if there's one. I'm not sure if there's one saying that comes to mind, as much as more a feeling that if I really believe that the goal, that what I'm wanting to do is important enough, both to the world and to myself, I'm going to do the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the thing regardless of how I feel that day.
That's a good one. It's almost like what your way of being is. I do what I know has to be done to have the impact and the influence, regardless of how I feel about doing it. Meaning, it keeps you doing what you know you need to do, even on the days that you'd rather go hang out at Dunkin' Donuts and have a cup of coffee.
Any other day. Wow.
Awesome. So what's next? What are you all fired up? Besides the book, anything fun coming up?
Well, I mean, when it comes to fun, I have got to be probably the most boring person that you've ever met. And yet I love it that way. I seem to really just get a kick out of life.
Yeah.
But no, so I really have nothing going on other than I'm busy promoting this book and having a lot of fun doing it. My great friend and business partner, Kathy Zader, and I have started an online member community called Go Givers International, where we're basically connecting people who have, who operate the Go Giver way through the 5 laws of the, from the story. And that's a lot of fun building that. We're having a blast with that. And so
That looks fun.
those things are keeping me pretty busy. I just have
Yeah.
a lot of fun doing that.
You have your hands in so many great pies. So, Bob, where can everybody get the Adversaries into Allies book?
Yeah, if they go to burg.com, burg.com, on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a graphic of the book. If they click there, it will take them to the page. They can get chapter 1 to see if they like it first. And if they like, they can click through, order it online, or at their favorite bookseller, they can get it there as well.
Yeah, guys, you're going to love the book. Again, it's Adversaries into Allies. And Bob sent me a copy to take a look at. And I got to tell you, I've been pouring through it going, highlight, highlight, highlight. I love it. Didn't I even text you? I think I was at the beach or something, and I was reading it, and I'm like, oh, Bob, I love this part. Thank you for putting it out. Thank you for being one of the most positive and powerful influencers in our community. And, you model something that I think is it could be done more, and that is you model such a humility, grace, and you have this genuine way of making people feel special, and you deserve a big award for that. I don't know what it's called yet, but we'll make one up. It might be the Dunkin' Donuts Guy Award.
Ooh, okay, I can go with that one.
Yeah. Bob, thank you. And as you're listening in today to this podcast, I'd love to hear, and I'm sure Bob would too, what was a principle or maybe something that Bob shared in his own experience about making this revelation of being an influencer and having this way to be more powerfully connected to people. We'd like to hear it in the comments below. Tell us, what was an aha moment for you? This is a great way to take all these ideas that are swirling around and really anchor them in and remember the things that are going to help propel you forward. So we'll look forward to reading them in the comments, and that way Bob will also know what of the principles you like the best. So Bob, thanks again for coming in today all the way from Jupiter, Florida, right?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. I always love talking with you anyway, so it's a special treat to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, goodbye everyone. We'll see you next week.